We're on the west coast of Scotland on the beautiful Taviallic estate, and it's one of the 3 tracts of land that Highlands Rewilding, a nature recovery company, is trying to restore to a condition where it's more like it was in prehistory, bringing large amounts of carbon back down out of the atmosphere and helping deal with the climate crisis, and at the same time increasing biodiversity as much as we can in the face of what is a collapse in biodiversity, not just here in Scotland but in the world. And we're doing that on 3 tracts of land across Scotland, trying to do it for profit, monetizing the natural capital, as the business people say, but also, as we do it, also working for community prosperity, the prosperity of the communities wherein we work. That's so important because we'll never deal with climate meltdown and biodiversity collapse unless we do it with the full fighting force and engagement of local communities, whether you're talking here in the Highlands of Scotland or in the Amazon rainforest.
Just looking at where the business is, what are the challenges and what are the opportunities that you face right now?
The main opportunity right now is for Highlands Rewilding to be a leader in a vital, essential new market, and that's the market in natural capital, nature recovery. And we have that opportunity. We're right on the frontier without being self-important or conceited or complacent in any way. We've done really well in the 4 years that we've existed so far. We're right out there, and if we can raise enough capital in the scaling round that we're running at the moment, we will have a very good chance of helping lead the way to something entirely new and totally needed if the governments of the world are going to deliver on the promises they made regarding nature recovery in the treaty they signed in 2022 in Montreal.
What are the challenges that you face in achieving that outcome?
For the financial institutions that have to come to the party, that have to literally buy into this and invest in the front runners on the frontier, everything's completely new. There never has been a nature recovery market. There aren't the policies in place even yet set by the government to make it crystal clear for them and cut down the risk they would have. But front runners like Highlands Rewilding have to entice them across the line. If we don't get the first multiple millions flowing into this market, it won't happen, and governments won't be able to deliver on their promises, and biodiversity will continue to collapse. And that's an existential threat. It's an existential threat to whole economies because, you know, if biodiversity continues to fall over a cliff, ultimately we can't feed ourselves, or at least only the rich can feed themselves. And so really this has to happen. And I do think it's a question of when, not if. I mean, this is realized. Governments signed that treaty. Many governments at war with each other signed that treaty in 2022 because they know biodiversity is collapsing and something has to be done about it. So we're trying to, if you think of the analogy of the wildebeests looking at the fertile ground on the other side of the river, and that river in Africa, and of course it's infested with crocodiles, and some wildebeest has to decide to be the first to jump into the water, and of course they do. Every year they do in that migration. So we're in the process of trying to get the first financial institution or institutions to jump in, backing Highlands Rewilding so that we can be a front runner and get to the promised land on the other side.
There is an irony in all this, and that is that the system that has delivered us this biodiversity on the edge of a cliff is the same system that we now require to fix it.
Stating that another way, does capitalism have a survival reflex? That's the question that we're part of, trying to be part of the answer to. And the jury's out, frankly. It is out. But you can see how it could work easily. And rewilding, nature recovery here in Scotland is a good example. What's the norm? The norm is subsidies for a form of farming that puts sheep up onto hills in vast numbers, way too many than compared to what you need, and they trash the landscape, and they cause the biodiversity to decline spectacularly. Very simple. Remove those subsidies, reward the farmers another way for protecting the land, for restoring what was there before. In the case of Tavialic, that would be a lot of temperate rainforest, beautiful temperate rainforest, and reward them that way. I mean, they're going to be paid the same, presumably even more, if we get the survival story right. But this is what we're trying to test, and we need financial institutions to start putting their money in the direction of survival and sanity, and then take it away incrementally from the ruinous things that are being bankrolled left, right and centre as things stand.
Can you put your head into a board director of a large corporation? What is in the way, if you're in that place, of, because they do recognise they have to be seen to be doing something, because consumers almost now necessarily demand to know what the brands that they purchase are doing. What's in the way, do you think, between them saying, let's do something, and let's do it with an organisation like, or actually, Highlands Rewilding? What's in the way?
I think the norms have become so enculturated. The short-termism, the way that financial institutions are rewarded by just simply putting buckets of money into companies that are really not paying any attention to a livable future. They're acting as though they don't care whether there's a livable future on this planet. And financial institutions and financiers who are passive and just go along with what's easy, they back that. And the worst example, of course, is fossil fuels. And we know what they do to the planet, both to climate and biodiversity, and yet trillions of pounds keep going into fossil fuel companies, even as we speak. So this is what we've got to be part of the solution that says, look, there's another way of doing this. Look at what we're doing. Look, it's relatively easy. It's not rocket science. And look at the beauty and nature that we're restoring. Isn't this a better way to invest money? You're still going to get a return, provided the governments come up with a policy furniture that changes the reward system, introduces a system change in the way that land management is rewarded. Provided that happens, then people will make just as much money and more, and they'll have a livable world. And what value can you put on that?
You're 70 years old. The pressure must be quite extreme.
It is, but I've been here before. Elements of this feel like Groundhog Day to me, because I lived through another risky entrepreneurial frontier, and that was the early days of the solar industry. And the company that I founded, Solar Century, ultimately found a way of breaking through. It grew exponentially in the way that I hope Highlands Rewilding will, and that was very stressful. But you know, there are ways of coping with it, and it's a joy ultimately, because the breakthrough was because of the team of people that came together, brilliant people, half a dozen of which, by the way, have come with me to the Highlands Rewilding adventure and brought all that battle-hardened experience. So I think we find ways of getting to sleep at night, but make no mistake, this, if it grows and succeeds in the next phase, this company will need to be led by somebody younger and smarter than me, and I will greatly enjoy the day that we appoint that person.
You told me that the foundations, they are not engaging. Why do you think it is?
I don't know. I'm a bit baffled by the foundation story. There's a view, widespread view, including some of our investors, that what will be needed to make all this work in the next phase is what they call blended finance, and that is a bit of for-profit private finance mixed with, in some way, philanthropic funding that is foundations investing for social good, just for social return, not for a return in pounds, shillings and pence. So early on we had lots of encouragement from a consortium of foundations that have been put together by the World Economic Forum, but for whatever reason that hasn't led anywhere. They haven't been able to help us at all. And so we haven't really been able to deliver on the fundraising that we hope to do in the philanthropic pillar yet. But we'll keep trying, and we'll put the case one by one to these foundations and see which of them might like to help contribute. And there are huge social rewards. It's not just about making a good green business. It's about social rewards in terms of community prosperity and well-being, and this is a perfect example here in Tavy-Alec. The community that we're part of and working very well with is facing a future of extinction. They're going to age to extinction, and Tavy-Alec, the village just up the road here, will become a ghost place. There'll be holiday homes for rich English folk, and the residents will die off, and all the youngsters that remain, the few that remain, will have to go to Glasgow and Edinburgh. There's a real rural housing crisis, and a foundation or foundations could materially help with fixing that. Again, it's not rocket science. There are all sorts of ways to help fix it, and the social benefit would be huge, because you'd literally be saving communities as well as providing a rural workforce with somewhere to live so that they can save the environment and protect nature.
It's an extraordinary situation in this world that a community that's been there for hundreds of years is now on the very edge of its existence.
It is. And it's a national problem. The Scottish Parliament in May declared a state of emergency over rural housing. And it's not just Highlands Rewilding that faces problems in housing the rural workforce that we will need if we're going to scale going forward. It's all kinds of companies that need rural jobs and rural workers. So that's unfinished business. And with the change of government here in the UK, we can be cautiously confident. The last government was blind to it, as so many other things. But this next government, who knows, will inject a bit of vim into the quest, not just to create a nature recovery market, but to save the communities in which the nature recovery is going to have to take place.
Well, there's bound to be a relationship between those facts and the fact that at the very beginning of this adventure back in 2020, you invested in a building, basically in a building company, but quite a special one, because it basically builds wooden houses and the connection with sequestration of carbon and so on.
Yeah.
And now that investment, a difficult investment, comes to a new place, doesn't it?
Well, Makar, the company you're talking about, is indeed a manufacturer of buildings, both commercial buildings and residential buildings, made from timber. And in the building going forward, it's vital that we shift away from bricks, steel and concrete to timber. And that's true in Scotland, it's true globally. If we don't, the construction industry as it stands is the number one source, this is mind-blowing, but it's a fact, the number one source of emissions on the planet, because of all the carbon that gets emitted in making all the concrete and the bricks and the steel and everything else. So we have to move to timber. And it's really exciting that we have this opportunity with a currently troubled and in danger company, Makar, to pivot that company around to creating low-cost timber housing and large commercial buildings made of timber that become a sort of carbon pump, because they're taking carbon down out of the atmosphere into the timber. That's what happens when the timber's growing. And then you put that into the wooden buildings and you're storing it, basically. You're sequestering it. It's like a pump of carbon out of the atmosphere. If you do it at enough scale, you're really contributing to helping fix the climate problem and avoid all the emissions from the building materials that you've displaced So we'll try and make that work, but like Highlands Rewilding, that's a risky enterprise. This is a company that has faced a perfect storm of troubles, led perhaps by the planning regime here in Scotland, which is completely dysfunctional, broken. It's not serving the big problems that we have to deal with, and which Scottish Government policy actually requires to be dealt with. The planning is all sort of, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that, and barriers are put up, and it's as though they're completely behind a ring fence from what the government's trying to do in fixing climate, fixing nature, and keeping communities alive.
It doesn't immediately seem obvious that having more people living in the landscape can go together with the landscape recovery.
Nature recovery is pretty labour intensive, and it has to be truly rural in terms of the workforce. You can't ship people in coaches out of Perth or Glasgow every day to do it. So there is a need for people in communities, in the landscape, to if you want to go for nature recovery. And that's fine in Scotland. There are only 5 million people in Scotland, and it's a pretty big country. So the government recognises this, recognises that they need to bring people back in to have healthy rural economies. They have a repeopling policy, and it's just a great shame that the planners seem to act as though they're trying to achieve exactly the reverse, keep people out.
Given the history of Scotland and people being moved from the land, it occurs to me at least that you're in the reverse. You're actually repopulating, resettling. Highlands Rewilding is talking about the ruins that exist on Highlands Rewilding's land being reconstructed, and they are, many of them, in just brick walls that haven't been lived in for hundreds of years. That's quite a remarkable ambition.
Yeah, and how cool would it be to see some of these communities recreated? Just over the hill from where we're sitting here in Taviallic, there's a ruined hamlet, I mean almost a village, just completely ruined. And that was through the clearances of people off the land. How magnificent would it be to have that full of vibrant young families working as guardians of the recovering landscape, the nature in recovery? I mean, I think that's a beautiful vision, and it will try and help make that happen. And not just here, on the other places we are currently working, and the places where we will work if we can raise the capital to scale in this year ahead.
There's also been another opportunity, Barrahormid and the model, family trust. How does it work? And what's the opportunity?
So what we've done with half of the Taviallic estate is we've sold it to a local family office who've set up a trust that exists only to protect nature. Off into the future, in perpetuity, it says in their articles of the trust that they created. And this is perfect for us because they've appointed us as land managers, and we will do exactly what we would have done had we owned the land. And the difference will be, and we'll share the proceeds from the natural capital in a win-win way. And they've also promised in the articles of the trust to work for community prosperity and honour the memorandum of understanding that we've set up with the community. So that element of community prosperity and taking care of the community is also part of it. And so what we've created is a mechanism for protecting essentially forever all the carbon that we managed to take down out of the atmosphere, all the biodiversity that we lift up in a way we couldn't if we owned the land ourselves, because at the end of the day we'd be a company, a private company, one that aspires to be very progressive, but a company nonetheless. And companies can hit rocks and go under. And then what happens? The land gets sold to the Donald Trump Rural Golfing Corporation or something, and you know everything you've done is just wasted. So we've got rid of that possibility, and lots of people like this model, and the community like it, of course, because they're interested to take and care of. The Scottish government tends to like it, officials and politicians, because it speaks to their land reform agendas and hopes for repeopling the landscape in the Highlands. And crucially, the financial institutions we talk to like it. They say, if we were to invest in you, this would be real upside for us, because what you've done is given us a social license to invest in natural capital and still get a return for our stakeholders, pension holders, if they're pension funds, that sort of thing, by working through Highlands Rewilding instead of doing the perhaps obvious thing, which is buying up large tracts of Scotland as a company and then immediately getting into trouble because they're trying to operate it from afar, down in London, in Edinburgh, wherever. So this is a model that we're hugely excited about, and we'll be trying to roll out in other tracts of land that we own going forward.
And also there was this very successful crowdfunding, which showed that actually there are lots of people without lots of money who are interested in investing small amounts, large amounts in Highlands Rewilding.
This is something that's unique to Highlands Rewilding. We are a mass ownership company, and we did that through the crowdfunding, the one crowdfunding round that we had last year. And we have 809 shareholders, most of whom came in during that crowdfunding round. We had a target of £500,000 for that round. We actually raised 1.2 million, and it's a wonderful feeling. People come. I meet people walking on the landscape, and talk to them, and it turns out they're shareholders in Highlands Rewilding, and they're thrilled about it. And they're inspecting the land that they co-own, and there's a look of joy on their faces very often. It's very cool, and it also, many of them are in the local communities where we work. So that's another way of Highlands Rewilding becoming a creature of the communities where we work, and at minimum deeply rooted in those communities. And that's something that we have that currently other frontier players in nature recovery don't have. So we're very excited about that as well.
I wanted to save this for the last, and I know a bit of the answer, but I still think it's worth putting down. I mean, you had this very interesting trajectory. I mean, geology all the way through to here via head of Science Greenpeace UK, Solar Century, and not just as an entrepreneur, but as an environmentalist. And I sort of want to understand where that has come from. Why are you this passionate about the environment, about making these changes? I mean, lots of people feel it, but very few take the risks that you are now taking to achieve an outcome that many people just think is in the stars.
Well, I guess it comes back to upbringing, doesn't it, really? I had parents who encouraged me to love nature and taught me how to do that, brought me up to Scotland, to Highlands of Scotland, youth hosteling when I was a kid. So that's the bedrock of it. And then I did geology, which is studying the history of the planet, really, and did that for more than a decade, and sure enough, learnt a lot about the history of the planet. And when the first concerns about global warming, as it was then called, climate change, emerged in the mid-1980s, I took a look at those and thought, we can't take all that carbon out of fossil fuels and put it in the thin atmosphere. That's going to end in tears. And sure enough, fast forward, it's showing every sign of being a horror show, unless we can belatedly do something about it. So that's the motivation. There's something in me that says, we can't do this. I mean, how stupid are we collectively to trash our own planet? And so there's a rebelliousness, and of course many other people share this, but I've been fortunate enough to have the chance to do something about it on the frontier of an industry, solar energy, trying to displace the prime cause of climate change, fossil fuels, first, and then again, second time around, the frontier of a nature recovery industry that has yet to grow. Solar now is out there, knocking spots off fossil fuels. We need to do the same again with nature recovery and biodiversity collapse. And if we don't, as with climate change, that's an existential threat. Biodiversity collapse, another existential threat. Let's not be stupid. Let's do something about it. And if people like me can show the way, then that's got to be a good thing. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning.